Welcome to Better Mental Health, a podcast for men looking to build a resource and community around destigmatizing mental health. I'm Jamie.
I'm Blake.
And I'm Blair. We're actually in person, all three of us.
For the first time.
Yeah, for the first time.
So yeah.
Want to at least recognize that, right off the bat. We're excited. I got a whole camera set up. Jamie, thank you. But so yeah, today we're going to talk about death, our experiences with it, our beliefs about it, how our lives have been shaped by it, and we'll see where the conversation goes.
It can be a heavy topic, and Blair, I would think it might be appropriate for you to kick off the conversation.
Yeah.
If you want to share why that would be appropriate, that might be helpful.
For anybody who hasn't seen my mental health journey episode, I guess actually we all did our mental health journey episode together, but
right.
Where I shared my own mental health journey. I lost my dad when I was 24 very suddenly, and then my mom and over a period of time, pretty short time, but yeah, so I've had a little bit more of like a direct experience with death, I would say. But what got me thinking about this obviously was my own experience with it, but a conversation with a friend earlier this week, we just talked about like, all right, so what's your relationship with death? And our answers were just so stark in difference. And I've talked about this with my partner, who's deathly afraid of death. Which is weird to say, but
is that where that term comes from?
Yeah, I guess so actually. But yeah, so that was something I knew I wanted to ask each of you. It was like, all right, so what is your relationship with death? Not necessarily have you experienced someone close dying, but what is your relationship with death? So I don't know who wants to jump in, but
yeah.
I mean, I'm afraid of it.
Yeah, okay, that's usually the answer, so I'm curious about that.
I mean, yeah, if you think, I think if I think about it enough, it's like, it's terrifying to think about going into the unknown. And I don't know that I have a concrete enough belief to trust that whatever it is on the other side will be an okay place. But I generally have a belief that we're going to go someplace that's positive, good, full of good energy and love. Like, I think I genuinely believe that there's some version of that. So that's helpful.
No, that's not how you always have believed. That's it. You were talking about how you've fallen into that belief a little bit more.
I guess, yeah. So there's, different versions of how that looks. And we grew up in Christian Science. Go watch that episode if you haven't watched it. But Christian Science prescribes our lives as being spiritual and eternal, and we're just in this false material existence. And so I think for a long time, I don't know if this is what you guys believe, but for a long time, I just believed that we were spiritual beings. I didn't understand what that meant in reality, but it was just like, okay, I trust that that's what I'm being told.
Yeah, and then what we were told was like, oh yeah, death isn't real.
Yeah,
life is not real.
Yeah.
Birth is not real. Life is eternal. Death is not real.
Yeah, it almost made whatever comes after the more real version of whatever this experience is. And so I think a lot of people in Christian Science also ignore death and don't talk about it. I don't think there's a healthy relationship with the concept of death. And oftentimes when people died, the responses that you'd get were like, not condolences or not energy in an empathetic, heartfelt way. It was more like, oh, that person is now in their right place.
Yeah,
they never died. They almost ignore the death completely.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Now they're part of that like spiritual being.
Yeah,
and they're not represented material anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, that's what I remember. I mean, my first experience with death was my grandma on my mom's side, and I remember having those kinds of conversations. I was a little bit younger.
Yeah,
and so I knew old enough to know like what death was, but not old enough to have formed my own thoughts and opinions on what I thought would happen.
Do you remember it impacting you in a real way, or was it kind of like, oh, that can happen, or what was the?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I'm trying to remember exactly like how I felt about it, but because it was so long time ago.
Yeah,
I think it was. I remember seeing like how much it affected my mom, and that was what I was more, I think, concerned about than at that time. And of course, I was sad too because I loved her, and we would see them quite regularly. So it was hard. But I remember having those kind of like Christian Science discussions around it. Yeah, like she's moved on to this spiritual. I don't even know what the form, not really, not a form, realm, but just moved into a different sort of phase of spirituality, I guess. Yeah.
One of the stories, I mentioned it when this other person that I met in the wild who also grew up tangentially to Christian Science, not like the way that we did, where we were like enveloped in it in a community and school and summers and stuff. But he had been in the realm, at least, of Christian Science. But he knew this story, and I think you guys probably know it too. It's very popular in Christian Science circles to explain what happens after death. This old man who is like interested in going to get pie downstairs or something. Have you heard this one?
It was Mary Baker Eddy's servant.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was like walking down the stairs, tripped and fell or something like that, but he was like holding something, and then he fell and he died. And then Mary Baker Eddy was there, so the founder of the religion was praying for him and raised him from the dead. And then he shared his experience of what it was like to die, and to him it was that he just kept walking. There was no
he kept walking downstairs to go get pie or something.
No recognition of the death itself, which I don't know if that story, I don't know if I do you guys believe that story?
I don't know. It's like after watching the video that we referenced for our episode on Christian Science, which is like a 2.5 hour long, like detailed dive into the origins of Christian Science. I don't know what I believe anymore as far as like the origins and stories from the religion, but
yeah, I'm with you on that, because it seems like the more I've learned about it, the more a lot of those stories feel fabricated. And so I don't know. I mean, I believe that experiences like that can happen, where, I mean, you were talking about a book that has a lot of near-death experiences, and I think those experiences are very real, and people come back with all kinds of kind of amazing things to share.
The story that sort of tracks from the near-death experiences, which maybe tracks with his story a little bit, but it's like people often describe out-of-body experiences where they come out of it, they like still feel somewhat connected to that consciousness, and then they floating above their body, and then they enter a spiritual realm that feels like all love. And just a lot of people don't want to come back to their body in these near-death experience stories, and really enjoy the like overwhelming sense of peace and love that they feel from that space.
So my only question about that, I fully believe that those stories and experiences are real. My question is, would they have had that experience if they weren't capable in some way of coming back? You know what I mean?
Right.
Were they were on the brink of death? Did they actually die and then come back?
Yeah, it's just
or were they? Yeah, was it a mental experience that was going on in their mind that then they recollected upon waking up?
Yeah. Some part of consciousness that's still happening in brain activity, some type of drug that's being pumped into their brain or something. Right. I think that from what I understand, and Lauren can speak to this a lot better because she's really into near-death experiences. She's going to listen to this and be like, I wish I was on this podcast being able to talk about it. But from what I understand, there's been enough people who they were like completely brain dead and fully dead for a certain amount of time, like scientifically, where it didn't make sense that they came back. And like,
and I guess if enough people have this experience too, where it's like the same experience, and so many people have had the same experience.
Yeah.
So.
You start to believe what you're hearing.
Right.
Something that, I mean, I know it came up when I talked about it with my siblings after my dad died, but there was the idea of like, oh, did he choose to not come back? Was that an option?
Right.
Which ended up being like, you ask all these questions and what is the point? At the end, it's still the same. But then that topic of whether or not he chose to stay dead, which is a weird thing to say, but whether or not he did that for our lives to move in a different direction, purpose of everything, or whatever the case may be. But
it's such a big question. There's so much that we could speculate and try and answer.
That's why it's like it's such a huge topic. But I'm like I'm more like grounded.
Let's get back into the mental health side of things and how it's a good point. I mean, that does get into some of the mental health aspects of it, which is coping. Like one of the ways we cope is to like try and understand the why questions, the big question. I don't know if that was part of your experience when your dad passed, but my experience, like when Lauren's dad passed, my father-in-law passed a couple of years ago, and there was just a ton of trying to understand the why questions, and using that as like a mental health coping strategy is diving into that stuff helps you feel like you're still connected to them in some way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the conversations were when my dad died were like around maybe there's a point to it, or what's just the connectedness of all things and events, and whether or not this was just another part of that.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know.
Do you mind walking through just the experience of when it happened, like you hearing about it, and what were like your first emotions around it?
I have no problem with it. It's sometimes for a few years after he died, I had so much shame around the way that I actually responded to hearing the news of his death. Because to get back into it, it was St. Patrick's Day, so that's always forever ruined. But it was St. Patrick's Day. I hadn't done anything. I was still living by myself in LA, like totally bored out of my mind. And so the night ended, or St. Patrick's Day ended, and then 1 or 1:30 in the morning, I was still awake because I'm a night owl like crazy. And my brother called me, and I don't know why I didn't think anything of it. Like 1:30 in the morning on the night after, or the morning after St. Patrick's Day. Anyway, so he was on the phone with a 3-way call or whatever with my other brother, and he was like, I don't know how else to say it, but Dad's dead. And it just doesn't register in that moment.
Yeah.
I was like, what? And so one of my brothers started to go straight into planning mode. He's like, all right, so we're gonna get you up here like as soon as possible. And the thing that I had shame around was my first inclination was like, I don't know if I can like get the time off for work. I don't know if I can afford to buy a ticket, plane ticket up north, because I was in LA. My parents and family were in Northern California. And my brother at the time was just like, Blair, what are you talking about? I'll get your ticket. Tell your boss
we'll
you're not
figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, okay. But yeah, there was shame wrapped around. That was my response. My first response was like, what about work? And so this has been a constant thing. Where,
I mean, that sounds like one of those things where it's such shocking news that you haven't fully processed like the momentousness of it, and so you're just like, oh, you're thinking like all the normal things.
Yeah, all the things I want to make sure that I'm to keeping track of. But so that was my experience with my dad.
Well, I want to go back into that. Was there a moment where after that where it started to settle in and you went into the like
for sure
emotional side of things?
We're getting trauma processing here. No, I mean, no, it's okay. I promise.
Yeah.
But I remember like getting off the phone with my brother, and I started to pack a bag immediately because my brother at the time, he was like, all right, I found a flight. Start getting ready. And it was so quick. So like I remember like starting to pack my bag, and just like, my whole body started shaking, and I was just like, oh my God, what? I'm going to go home and my dad's not going to be there.
Yeah.
And everybody's going to be sad, and it's just going to be like this really shitty experience. But yeah, it was like as I started packing my bag, like the tears started coming, and like my whole body was shaking. And then I think I got a Lyft or an Uber to the airport, and it was like 3 or 4 in the morning, and this person wanted to talk, and I was like, please, let's just not right now. This is before the times where you could be like, please don't talk to me. Or Waymo, which I don't know if you guys have taken one of those.
Yes, I love Waymo.
I haven't taken one yet, but
it's great.
I want to try. Anyways, not the worst part, but I do remember one of the parts that was really sad was just like sitting in the airport, and I'm like having so many emotions. I was like, I'm just going to be crying in the airport waiting for my flight for the next hour. And and then it got me thinking about, what's the term, this Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, Sonder?
Oh yeah.
Where you're constantly curious about all of the other people's experiences around you.
Yeah.
I was like, this could be happening at any point, anytime. Like someone could be in the airport waiting to go grieve their lost sibling or whatever. And anyways, in that moment, it was happening to me. But and then my brother picked me up from the airport, and we just hugged and cried into each other's arms for a while, which that had never happened in my entire life with him. Yeah, and the whole we started moving super quick, which is totally different than I think a lot of other Christian Science families do. But we were like, let's get the memorial service set up and planned, and because it was all of my siblings were out of state, so everybody had to fly back in and figure that out. So that was my experience with that, and it was a lot. I've had both the suddenness of losing a parent and then the slow deterioration. And I remember talking to our former friend who had lost his dad, and so this was when I had lost my dad very quickly, very suddenly, and he was starting to lose his dad, who had a stroke and then was slowly deteriorating. And we had conversations like a few years after I lost my dad, and he was basically in the process of losing his dad, and I was lamenting to him. I was like, I'm so jealous that you have time to like say the things you need to say or want to say to your dad. And he was like, Blair, no, like every memory that I have now of him in the state that he's in is basically like overriding another memory, good memory that I have with him. And I was like, that's really rough, actually.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no experience can be compared to, but it's a hard not to. That's what we do is we categorize exactly. And we compare. And I remember the story of that friend you were talking about, and he sort of experienced his dad having died before he died. He had to put that into a separate category.
Yeah, the stroke changed who he was.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So before losing my dad, though, like my relationship with death was like I had lost, I think, all of my grandparents before then, which is still crazy when someone our age is like has all their grandparents. I'm like,
or one at our age.
Yeah.
Or any grandparent.
But yeah, it's still wild to me. But yeah, so and I was never really close with my grandparents. Two of them were out of state, and I saw them so very rarely. So my experience with death was not like something that really hit home until my dad.
Yeah.
So.
There's a couple things I wanted to follow up on. Do you feel like you went through all the like 5 stages of grief in the order that they're in, or was it different? And then this is a totally different question, but I want to get into like how, as a friend, do you support somebody who is going through what you went through? Because I still look back on that time where you lost your dad suddenly, and it's, should I have like immediately flown out there and been there for you, or what did you need like from your friends at that time?
Yeah, I think you mentioned you watched the How I Met Your Mother episode, right? After Marshall loses his dad, and they all fly out.
They all go out there, and
you're like, oh.
Should
I have done that? No,
definitely should have done something different than what we did. Which I don't remember.
But we're younger.
What we did.
Like we were 24. Right?
Yeah, we were young, and we also didn't have the education, what it meant to help somebody. But so it's, of course, it's not like we could have done better, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. But
yeah. I appreciate you guys saying that later. But what was the first question? That was
5 stages of grief.
Yeah, are there 5 or 7?
I think there's 5, right?
Okay, I don't actually know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But someone in the comments can let us know.
Yeah.
But no, I definitely did not. I don't think it's never been a linear process. I think I'm still figuring out how to grieve fully my dad. In therapy I've had conversations about my dad, and still so many things I feel like have been unexpressed. Not necessarily I'm consciously pushing down, but I think it's just to get into those emotions. I'm like, it's such a unstable place. I don't know how long I'll be there. So I think it needs to be like a gradual kind of excavation.
Yeah.
That I haven't really fully done yet. Yeah, even on like psychedelics, I've had moments after my mom passed away, my mom passed away after my mom died, and I was in my family home. I would do a little bit of ketamine and go on walks, and that's such a disassociative. I was able to like, it wasn't like I was envisioning my dad and my mom, but I was able to just be like, all right, if I wanted to speak to them again right now on when I was on those walks, I was like, what would I say? And so I was just kind of having those conversations almost a little out loud, so it might have looked a little psychotic, but it was still super helpful. And I think it would help me. I don't know if I was moving through stages of grief at that point, but it still helped me at least identify the feelings that were present.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say no, I have not moved.
Yeah, the one of the things I've heard about the stages of grief is that it's actually, I don't know if it's been proven to not be true, but it's like that those stages of grief don't happen in the linear process. It's like you constantly re-experience different stages at different points in time. You could get hit with something that reminds you of a parent, and like all of a sudden you're like floored. It just is constant and always difficult. And so it might just, there might be a better term for it. We should look it up after the episode.
You mean in terms of stages?
Yeah, it's not like stages, but it's like the like experience of grief.
That was the thing that kept coming to mind. It's definitely not linear.
Yeah.
Which I feel like I've talked to, I haven't had specific clients yet. I'll start to have a client load over the fall. But when I've talked to people, I know. But when I start talking to people who have dealt with loss, it's always, it's never linear. And I feel like it comes in waves. Like something will hit and you'll just be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And then you'll dip and not have any recollection of anything happening at all or any feelings at all. So it's really dependent, honestly.
Yeah.
And then to get to your second question about what you guys could have done, I didn't know what I needed at that moment, but something I know now, and it wasn't after my dad that I knew it, but it was after my mom, was don't send a text saying, if you need anything, let me know. That doesn't help anything, because I'm like, the place that I'm in, I'm not going to reach out and be like, I need these things.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do, I feel like, is when you're trying to help a friend through grief or through loss, is just like, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do something, whether or not it's the thing that you needed. I think that's and like meals would have been amazing. That was very well done by family and friends who were living near my mom when she passed away. It was like, we got like casseroles and meals.
Yeah.
And I was like, sweet. I don't have to cook for like several days. That was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like that would be probably the most helpful. But yeah, I think the least helpful is the text of, just let me know if you need anything, because you're like, I won't.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the like thought, but I'm not going to let you know.
The intention is obviously good, but it doesn't solve, because you're just in.
You don't want to have to think about
like
what you need or what you're going to ask for.
You don't even
it's
have
not even that. It's like,
you don't have the ability
to. Because like, I'll be able to think of like, all right, so I need meals and I need like a ride somewhere or something, but I'm not gonna be like, okay, this person who said that they are open to helping out, like, I'll reach out to them and be like, I need this thing.
Hey, can you DoorDash me Chipotle?
Yeah. Not gonna happen. So so I think that would be something that could be helpful. But
that's good advice. And I think that hearing that, and also going through friends who have had experiences, it's like it's helpful to hear that information and then to take it and actually, next time something happens, actually do it. Show up for a person, like, buy them a couple meals or whatever it is, rather than
the impact of that for the amount of money or effort is monumental. So that is definitely something. I was going to say something that has been told to me that was impactful, that I have said to somebody who was dealing with losing a parent. They called me when I think their mom had just passed. They called me, and in that moment you're like, I don't know what to say. But the thing that came to mind for me was like, there's literally nothing I could say to make you feel better right now. It's just gonna take time. And that was told to me later on. That was really helpful to hear, was like, there's nothing I can say that'll make this feel better, that'll make this easier to move through. Like, it's just going to take time. So,
and I think that like, what's difficult about our world now, and I think the experience of death in the United States, is people don't really have the ability and the time to sideline their life. Number one, the people going through the experience of a family member passing, I know you can speak to this, it's like corporate America doesn't stop for that.
No.
So that's shitty in and of itself. And then all of your community is tied to a 9-to-5, has a family, has whatever going on, and they're busy, and it's hard to divert from that and give what we need to give to each other in this in this experience. So I think that's a shame, and something that we need to fix as a society, as a part of the experience.
So I had a friend who was talking about the loss of his child, going through that experience, and one thing he mentioned that has stuck with me is kind of what you were saying, Jamie. Like, the world moved. At first, people were there for them and did what they could, and then, but after some time, people just move on with their lives. They have their own lives to get back to. And was that your experience of, I'm still dealing with this, and everybody else just seems like they've moved on? And does that feel normal? Does that feel like unfair? Or what is the experience behind that?
Yeah. Losing a child, I can't fathom. We have friends who've had that. I can't like, that is a whole different level of grief that I don't think I can wrap my head around fully. But
it's different.
They're
not different level, but it's different. But
I think that there was some amount of that. What came to mind when you were saying that was, it was more my mom's. She wasn't even gone at that point, but I had been taking care of her, and then I went back to my life for 4 or 5 days. And I just remember being in my apartment, sitting and just being like, hold on. So I have to like try and go find it, because I'd gotten let go like the day before my mom got diagnosed with her cancer, and no, the day after. But I remember just being like, oh, how am I supposed to just keep going, keep moving through this, try and find a job. Yeah, so that's what my experience was, as far as like the world keeps on spinning.
Yep.
With my dad, I feel like it was more just, yeah, I don't know, there's nothing else that can be done about it. And I don't think there was any negative emotions towards anyone or the world itself, as far as I wish it would just stop so I could be in it a little bit more. Maybe that would have helped the grieving process, honestly. Like if it was, there's more community focus, or just, a more slowing down for the space to grieve. But yeah, I don't know. That would have been something different.
Yeah. The other thing I think about too is, in the context of destigmatizing mental health, like being in therapy, I wonder if that would have been a support to you in that time or not, or if you think that.
I was in therapy like during my mom's stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I had a therapist, and then I think it was like the month after my mom died that I stopped seeing that therapist. Just because it was, one, my extension of my benefits had gotten cut off. So instead of being like $20 a session, it was going to be like 150 or something.
Yeah.
And I had just lost my job. And so I was like, I can't keep doing this money wise. But there was also, it was tied to, I think, the difficulty in being uncomfortable in those therapy sessions. And I think that was the level that I was at that time. I was like, I'm not going to be able to sit here in this. So I think it would have helped if I had stayed with a therapist and started to continue to work through the things that were coming up at the moment. But yeah, that would have been helpful.
Do you think you need to have that time on your own with an experience like that, like losing a parent or a loved one? I mean, obviously everyone's different, but having a therapist in that moment might be helpful for some, or do you think it's helpful to have that time alone to sort of like process it first before getting help?
I think no matter what, you're going to be alone in those feelings, like to some extent. So I think the more that you can externalize that with someone is probably better. Yeah, so it's hard for me to say that it would be better for some to like just sit in that by themselves, because I think you're just that's gonna happen no matter what. You're gonna have a lot of alone time with those difficult feelings. But and I think that a lot of this comes back to like our relationship with death. So again, to get back to the friend conversation that I had earlier this week, like when I asked him like, what is your relationship with death, he was like, I'm terrified. And then he asked me right after, and I was like, honestly, I have no say in it. I have no. So I'm very much at a point where I'm like, I'm not very afraid of it.
Really?
No.
You genuinely believe that? Yeah.
I'm like, if it happens, it happens, and I have no say over it. The universe is going to do what it's going to do. And I think there were two things that came from that later. He was like, I was surprised by your answer, because he had not really heard someone be like, yeah, I don't really care. Whatever happens, happens. And then the other part was something that I'm not remembering at the moment.
I was just going to say, it's interesting for me. I'm not necessarily afraid of death itself. I'm more afraid of what leads up to it. If it's something quick and painless, that's great. And I have no issue with death itself. But if it's like something that's drawn out and painful, that's terrifying.
That was exactly what I said. I was like, I have no fear of death whatsoever. I have a fear of pain and suffering. I would rather go quickly and have it be done with than that. Which again, like making the difficulty of losing my dad versus my mom vastly different, because one day my dad was there and then he was not, and I was like, shit, I didn't have like a chance to say things and talk to him about things. But then what was different with my mom was like I was seeing her decline, and I was like, by the time that she actually died, there was a huge part of me that was like, geez, like mercy. But
I can't help myself. You guys heard that joke? It's when I die, I want to go like my grandfather, peacefully in my sleep, not terrified and screaming like the passengers in this car.
I haven't heard that. Sounds like a joke my dad would make.
Yeah.
That's
so funny.
It's true.
Yeah. I mean, but it's I guess like for you, Jamie, because you said you were scared of death.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Like any pain and suffering leading up to it, or the actual
No,
dying itself.
yeah. I mean, of course, I don't want to suffer before death. Like that's terrifying in and of itself. But it's really the experience of death. It's almost. I've had moments where I felt the way that you describe, where it's it's going to happen, and this is sort of like I feel like a natural processing of death. The more I think about it, of course, it's going to happen, and I hope that when it happens, I feel satisfied with my life, and that I feel complete in sort of the experience of this existence. And so there's a lot of
hard feeling.
Yeah. There's a lot of thought put into that. And also, what did I contribute? Did I like wake up and go to bed every day feeling like I did something to better myself or better my environment? It's that sort of thing. Like that's impactful for me in processing death. But the actual crossing over like part, I think it's just, I don't know. I think of it kind of like, I don't know if you've like the experience of skydiving or something like that. You don't know what it's
that's right.
You don't know what it's going to be like leaping out of the plane until you jump. And so it's that fear, that buildup of the jump is what I imagine
of it.
What I imagine. And I do believe that there's some experience on the other side of this, and I believe that there's love in there. And so I trust that, and I trust that the experience of jumping out of an airplane is going to be really fucking fun and cool. But until I jump and go through it, I not trust it's not scary.
When we face the unknown, it's terrifying.
Exactly.
But most of the time when you face the unknown, then you end up growing because of it. So maybe that experience will just be a growth experience.
Yeah, growth for my soul.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where your two views differed, right? As far as you think that you're under the under the impression that something does extend past this experience, and you said it's more what lights out.
I think it's just lights out. Yeah. I think that it's possible that like your consciousness might move on to another like dimension or plane or whatever, but I don't think that experience will be something that like I can conceive in this state.
Oh,
you know what I mean? I won't have any recollection of who I was on Earth. It could be another state of consciousness, but I don't think there's going to be any direct tie to this experience.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I think it'll be just lights out.
Yeah.
That's hard for me to process. I mean, I guess it sounds like to some degree you're open to sort of whatever in some ways. It's not like you're like,
it's just, I can't remember anything before I was born.
Yeah.
So being able to like remember anything after I'm gone is hard for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's very logical of you, Blake. It's very practical.
I was gonna say that like the way that you described, I'm never gonna know. I had an experience of like my dad. I've had a few actually. One was a dream, very specific, that happened a few months after he died. But then there was another experience. I think I've told you guys about the shooting star.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
I'll say it again.
Go through it though.
Yeah, but I was taking care of my mom. So this was only like 3 or 4 years ago. Crazy that it's already that long. And then I was taking care of my mom, and I took a break to go like out on our back patio and where my house was in Petaluma. It was like beautiful night sky. Always did stargazing with my dad. I had this thought, and I don't know where it came from, but I've done the thing in my life many times where I've tested. I would say God, and when I was in Christian Science, I'd probably say, "Oh, okay, I want a sign from God or something that you're real." I never got anything of note when I was doing that, saying of God specifically. But then whatever thought came to me in this moment, I was like, all right, I want to talk directly to Dad. I'm like, Dad, if you're out there, as I'm looking at the stars, I was like, all right, Dad, if you're out there in some capacity, I am going to see a shooting star in 3, 2, 1. And then as I said a shooting star like streaked right across my vision. So not like, where you catch a glimpse of it. It was like right where I was looking across this.
That's wild. I've got goosebumps.
Yeah.
And I've heard that story before, but
so I remember just in that moment, I was like, damn it. I was like, I wasn't expecting it. And then now what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
But I landed more on what you were describing as I am never going to understand what that experience meant. What's after this life? Like in this experience, I'm never going to understand what's after. So like, why even try?
Yeah.
I think just enjoying what we are able to experience while we're here is like the most important thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Speaking of that patio at your family home, that was a super fun experience where we all got together and our other buddy Matt, who it'd be nice if he was here with us too.
Yeah.
But and I did mushrooms on the back patio, and that was like just the most amazing experience.
I'm telling you, yeah. Psilocybin gives you some pretty spiritual experiences. That's for sure. Yes. You had a different.
It was spiritual until it wasn't. It was amazing,
and then it was terrifying.
Yeah, I felt like I had reached enlightenment at one point. I was like hovering in time and space, and things were floating above me and around me. But then it took a dark turn. After.
It came crashing back down. In a scary bathroom and
yeah.
That was actually crazy. You came in that same experience. It was only a few months after my mom died, or maybe several months, but either way, it was recent after my mom passed away. And then you guys came and did this experience, and then you went to this bathroom, and you're like, I don't know what it is, but I was in that bathroom. You can explain it better.
I mean, yeah, it was a couple things. One part of me was like, I think maybe there was some version of knowing that, not whether you had told me or not. It was like, it just felt like a dingy bathroom, and also you're on drugs. There was holes in the wall. Mm-hmm. So like that combination, and then just being in there, I had to pee a bunch. And so I went in there like multiple times, and every time I was like more scared to go back in there.
Yeah.
And so I think that being on mushrooms, you do have an energy read.
No, I had an energy read on the house in general, because we were outside the whole time.
Yeah,
and we're on mushrooms, so you're just on a different level. But yeah, I remember having to go to the bathroom, or I had to go, I think, change into like my suit or something because we were going to go in the hot tub. And I remember being like afraid to go in the house.
Yeah.
Like there was some energy that I was feeling. And again, it probably was just because you had told us about the experience and taking care of your mom, and obviously she had died in there.
Yeah.
And so maybe just knowing that, like, I was creating the energy, but the fact that we both felt something about the house is, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's a good point. Things shifted once I went into the house for me. That was when things started to get darker. And so maybe I should have stayed outside. I think when you're on mushrooms, being outside is the best thing in the world, and you should just always be outside.
I would say, anybody who is taking any notes from our experience, don't
go inside.
Don't learn anything from this podcast.
Inside or like at a show. I don't know. People can do it.
Also,
but I would not the first time.
This is not advice. Don't take drugs.
Don't take drugs.
Don't do any of this. I don't know. I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah. Legally, don't do anything.
Oh man, sure. Sorry, I derailed us.
No, that's all right. But
speaking of death and drugs, like ego death is a real thing.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever heard about ayahuasca and that experience, but I want to try it.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely do. I've had.
Wait, what? You're gonna have to explain.
You don't know ayahuasca? Ayahuasca is this drug that it's in South America, and it's starting to make its way into the U.S. There are places where you can do it, but it's illegal, and there's loopholes. I guess different places still do it, even though it's illegal. But
colonized a little bit. At the moment,
yeah. But the idea is it's a drug where you take it and people experience ego death, and there's also some purging that happens, both like actual purging, like physically, you either vomit or have diarrhea sometimes. But the way people explain it is just like a teacher, and they learn something about themselves when they take it. And it's not an experience you want to have over and over. It's like something that is really hard to go through, but really profound for a lot of people. And so, I don't know, it was compelling enough for me to be like, I kind of want to try it.
Oh, it's terrifying, but
yeah,
I think that if you see it as a teacher and you're not resisting the experience and the journey, then I think it can be incredibly helpful.
And I think it helps in the process of being more okay with death is to understand like our identity as dying and like having some sort of ego death. Then we're more comfortable with this experience being gone. Yeah.
So do you want to try that because you think it'll help you with your fear of death?
Not specifically that. I think more just like I want to be the best version of myself in this lifetime. And I think that I want to do the things that will help me get there. And that sounds like a path of, attempting to keep working on it and get there. So.
Something we're not addressing either that I feel like I might have a different relationship with death. Like I've talked about mine, and I'm very much take me now. Not really, but but what I'm trying to get at is your relationship with death, or does your relationship with death change when you get married and have like a partner, or you have kids? There are more people who depend on you. Does like your fear of death start to exacerbate in those realms?
So, yeah,
good question.
It is a great question because it did change after we had Avit. We had Avit. We were on a trip actually for Matt's wedding, and Avit was at home with my parents. So we had left Avit with my parents for a weekend, and we were driving along the California coast. And what was his name? That was like our driver in the van.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And he was this young dude.
Yeah,
he was like
young guy,
21 years old or something like that. Really sweet guy. Was just driving crazy on the roads. And Lauren and I were both back there like, we have a child, drive safer. Lauren yelled at her. She was like, we have a kid. Can you drive like more safely, please? And you just feel like this responsibility, because it's like the idea of your kid being left without that parent figure, without that guidance, is something that breaks my heart. Like, it's terrifying to think of. And I really want to be here for Avit for as long as I possibly can be, in a way that, until it becomes to the point where they feel like this experience is okay to have without me, which may never happen. But the goal is to launch Avit in a way where they can be independent and not need me. But yeah, it's really scary for that reason. And it also encourages me to want to be healthier and live longer, because I want to experience my child for longer and see what they do. And it also makes me want to have more kids, so that when we're gone, they're still family.
Yeah. That's a big component as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I still think that I perceive everything the same way. I don't think any of that's changed. It's just there feels like more purpose around being here for Avit, for sure.
Yeah.
Was that like a switch that was flipped immediately
as soon as they were born?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
I think so. Life got overwhelmingly different after Avit was born, for sure. Probably content for another episode about parenting and fatherhood and stuff like that. But I do think that things switched pretty quickly. It was pretty immediate.
Yeah.
That was a thing about my relationship with death that changed, like my mindset around having children. And it's not fully fledged. I don't have a full understanding of what that view is, but there was a part of me that was like, I am less inclined to have kids now, having lost a parent early on in my life, because I'm like, I would hate to have a kid and have something happen to me and make them feel what I'm feeling now at any point in their life. Yeah, so that changed. Yeah. And not to say that it was like, that was the thing that I was like, okay, now I don't want kids. But it was definitely a factor in my head where I'm like, I don't want a child to ever have to lose me as their parent. Yeah. I don't know. It's weird.
No, it's not weird. I mean, it makes sense. A lot of what we do with our children is project our own pain on them, which is somewhat problematic in and of itself, because like we try and live through our kids in ways that we shouldn't. But one of the ways that shows up is like not wanting them to go through the pain that we've experienced. And I think that's a good reason for a lot of people to not have kids, is because they think that this world is really hard. So I get that.
You made me think. I want to do like more research on this now, because I know there's like other cultures and other civilizations that I feel like had healthier relationships with death, where they saw it as purely a part of life,
as normal as birth.
As normal as birth,
and something to almost celebrate.
And I'm not sure where we got lost in that, and at least in the U.S., it feels like it's still it's not accepted in the same way. Like it's not as much seen as it's a natural part of life. I mean, some people I'm sure look at it in a healthier way, but it's not talked about like that. I don't feel like. So it'd be interesting. I don't know. Now I'm like curious to do more research and like maybe look at other civilizations that had healthier relationship with it.
I had a conversation with a woman on an airplane who I sat next to her. She worked for Bob's Red Mill. And she was really sweet, and like we just got talking about all sorts of different things, and she told me about her mother who had passed, and her mother had passed in old age, and so she was talking about the experience of it and the difference between her and her sister. Her sister couldn't handle it, couldn't be there, and was having a really, really hard time with it. And so she distanced herself from the death and has really struggled in her grief. And she, on the other hand, went and stayed with her mother while she was passing and experienced the death together. And she talked about how beautiful it was and like the things that she was, and it was natural death. It wasn't like painful and traumatizing in that way. So I think that experience of death in this like moving on after a full life.
Right.
Yeah.
And she was able to go peacefully and pain-free thanks to the doctors. And so like the way she described it is it just helped her be able to process and move on. And she really saw it as a gift.
Yeah.
So it was cool to hear that perspective and something that sort of has stuck with me.
That kind of brings up, like, it's interesting to look at death in like a way where it's expected and like, oh, it's at the end of a long, happy life and they went peacefully and all that versus, oh, they went suddenly and at a young age. And I could see reacting to those two different types of scenarios be, obviously it's totally different.
Yeah.
Where one is expected and I don't know how old her mom was, but if she's in her 90s and it's her time versus somebody who goes in their 40s or 50s or earlier.
Yeah.
To be, I don't know. It just got me thinking like that experience would probably be, because you're expecting it, you can process it a little bit easier versus something unexpected.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I have witnessed, I guess it's just my mom who I've actually seen die. I was curious if you guys had, God, if I could just not say I'm curious once.
Right. It's okay to be curious.
We all say it.
I'm curious. Yes, I wanted to know if you all had experienced death in that way. Have you actually been present with someone dying?
I have two experiences, not present, but the first experience was I witnessed somebody, we heard a noise in a bathroom at a Noodles & Co. Lauren and I were at Noodles & Co. We were eating and we started hearing like this gasping noise and I was like, is that like, it was like distant enough and I was just confused by it. And then it happened maybe 4 times and I was like, there's something going on in the bathroom. So I opened up the bathroom. There's a man on the floor, his head completely bleeding out and he was gasping for air. So I screamed, call 911, came out and all that jazz. And it was terrifying, but he passed away. But I didn't know him, but it was just this terrifying moment that felt surreal and was difficult for me to process. And I think that just a fear of being out of control in that moment and not knowing what to do was hard. And it made me want to actually become first aid certified again, like re-up that, because I had done that before, but I didn't feel prepared in that.
Yeah.
And I would have liked to have been. The other one was when Lauren's dad passed. We were all on the phone and he was in the process of, they were like asking if we should like resuscitate him if he flatlines and all that stuff. And I get emotional talking about it, but it was just like, we were all on the phone together. And Darlene had shared that we'd lost Dean, and it was just like, it was brutal to hear that and be in real time experiencing that. I mean, there's no good time to hear that news, of course, but it just was like really, really painful. And also being with Lauren, your partner, who's losing her dad, it was just like
knowing the like depth that she's gonna feel that forever.
Right. Yeah. So we were just out. We were walking around in our neighborhood, just like sobbing. And so that experience didn't feel like I was with someone physically who was dying, but I was in that moment, and that was just.
You were losing someone in real time.
Yeah. And I remember that experience being like scary and numbing, and simultaneously like you just didn't think it was real what you were experiencing, but it was very real at the same time and very powerful and just overwhelming. I don't really know what else to share about it, but
I appreciate
that's my my answer to the question. And I think that I don't know what if that like experience, I want to hear more about what the experience was for you and being with your mom, with her like in presence while she passed, but if you're open to sharing.
No, like it was, you've seen how many hundreds of deaths and movies and films and such, but so you're like, all right, I have an idea of what to expect. And then the days leading up, we had finally gotten some help taking care of my mom with these 2 Fijian women who were just like angels, literally the best people on planet, who had dealt with death thousands of times over. They were pretty they're pretty cold a little bit. Like after my mom had died and they had obviously were no longer needed. So they were like, we're going to take off, let you guys grieve. My brother shared that he was crying when he hugged her, saying thank you so much. And she was like, move on. Just like she would want you to, but like it was just so he in the moment he was like, the fuck, I just lost my mom. And later he was like, actually it was really good advice, and she's seen it so many times. But anyways, that kind of an aside. But yeah, so these women, the reason I bring them in also is because like they were so helppful in like managing us through the stages. Like, all right, so she may start saying that she's seeing people who aren't there.
Right.
That's another clue that it's coming soon. Yeah. So that was super helpful. But the actual sitting there with my mom, we rolled her hospital bed that was in our living room over to like the window so she could look at the backyard. And my aunt and uncle were there, and there was a part of me that was very frustrated that they were there. And I was like, I swear to God, if you say anything about Christian Science right now, while I'm losing my mom, I'm going to lose it. But thankfully, they just were there, they were present. And I think my sister pointed out later, she was like, it was great that my mom would have loved that her sister and her brother-in-law were there. And I was like, that's true.
Yeah, valid.
Yeah. But yeah, my experience of watching my mom, like for the last 2 nights, like I was just staring at her neck. You can see her pulse. And she was on a lot of morphine,
painkiller,
morphine mostly at that point. So, but yeah, it was really rough. But again, there was emotions for sure once she was finally gone. There was a little bit of relief, but then I let myself fully feel it. I walked out onto we had a deck that faced west, and I just sat out there while the sun set and just was bawling, like letting it all hit me. But yeah, it is not my experience of watching my mom die was very much, that's not the pretty, like, peaceful way that I've seen it. It was very much like a struggle. I don't know what's happening. So it was, yeah. And eventually it was just like a final, goodbye, which was very, again, there was some mixed emotions of she's finally gone because she's been suffering for over a year. And then there was like, oh, I just lost my mom. So I recount it obviously right now with less emotions than I want to. I want more access to these, which is why I'm in therapy. But yeah, that was my experience.
There's 2 things I'm thinking about. The moment you're talking about where she was like struggling a little bit more and it wasn't what you knew to be like the pretty experience, is that like she was actually like expressing confusion?
Yeah, it felt like there was a part of her that didn't want to leave.
I see.
I think, yeah, actually that was a few of my siblings and I were all saying things to her. I don't know what she could hear at that point or what she was processing, but we're like, you don't have to hold on. All of us will be okay. Because I think that's what it was. Our own interpretation of her resistance to letting go was like she was nervous to leave us without a mother and like what that might do to us. So we were trying to, at least if she could understand us in that moment, just be like,
put her mind at ease.
Yeah, just like we'll be okay. All of us are going to be taken care of. But yeah, there was like a resistance, it felt like, from her in that moment to just let go. But yeah.
Wow. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. You said there was 2 things?
Well, the other thing that I was thinking about is to give context to Lauren's dad passing in my story is just that it was unexpected what was going on with him, and he was very much fighting what was going on. And in the moment where things started to go south, he had been fighting what was going on, and he was with doctors and he was getting better. And so we didn't expect it to happen. And then something all of a sudden shifted. And so it was very much like shock from, oh, he's getting better. Finally, thank God, to he could die. And
I will say I have heard that in several cases when I've talked about death with people, that moment of like right before death, there's like they're actually looking better, and then all gone.
Yeah.
So yeah, anybody who's experiencing someone close to the end, if things like get better, I don't know, I'm not saying don't have hope, but I'm like, just, I guess
that can happen.
That can happen. Yeah. And if things are getting better, and then I'm just trying to lessen the shock that you.
Right. But we're human beings. We're not, I don't know how to explain. We're not robots where it's like all of a sudden things start getting fixed. Things are going to work. It's a lot more unpredictable. And I think it's helpful to have that knowledge that impermanence is real and we are decaying beings, and like fighting something it is really hard on your body. And so, yeah, it's just, shit can go south.
For sure. And then,
yeah, Blake, your experience. Yeah.
Oh, I feel weird talking about, because I have not experienced the same level of closeness, I guess, to like your guys' experiences. I mean, I the only time I remember I was with my dog who was having seizures, and we thought he'd be okay. He would have these like little seizures, and then he'd be fine after a few minutes. We started having them more and more, and then one night he had a really bad one, and then he was just like laying on the ground, just like breathing really heavily. And I remember just like laying down next to him and holding on to him and like feeling him breathe, and then he just stopped. And I remember being like, "Mom, Blaze isn't breathing anymore." And I remember her like coming over, and we just both started like crying over him. It was very surreal to be in that moment. Again, I can only imagine when it's a family member, but like being there in that moment, like when it just happens, and like yeah. I mean, that was, I can't remember how old I was, but I was fairly young, and that has definitely stuck with me.
Yeah, I feel like
to this day,
that's such a good thing to bring in. I was like, I didn't even think about like animals.
Yeah.
I've had like we put down my mom's dog earlier this year because she was 15 or 16 and a yellow lab. The vet was like, "Hold on, this is a yellow lab at 15 years old.
Still around?"
Yeah. So I mean, that watching a dog pass away, especially that. Actually, my brother and I were was like dark humor a little bit when we put my mom's dog down, but we were like, man, would have loved to have done that with my mom, or like would have loved to, if that's the way I could go. That sounds great. You just, they like give you a little drugs, other drugs,
you kind of just fall asleep.
There is some in some states now. If you're like going through something, you can elect to kill yourself in a peaceful way rather than go through the suffering. So that's a wise move on our part in terms of allowing people to make that decision for themselves instead of
That's a huge conversation, like in the mental health world too. I think there's some realm of the mental health practice who believe like if someone has been dealing with depressive symptoms for X amount of years and like they've tried everything, like
interesting,
assisted suicide, like that should be available to them. I'm not saying that's what I profess, or I don't have all the information on it, but I think it's going to be becoming a more hot topic to for everyone to discuss in that realm.
I haven't given that much thought. Wow.
Yeah But this is a big topic. I'm sure we could keep going on for for a long time, but
hours and hours. Let's find a way to wrap it up for sure. You guys have any thoughts on closing out?
I mean, this was a great conversation. I'm glad that we were all together for it. We'd love to do that again.
Such a heavy topic.
One more in-person episode. It's fun.
For sure. But I think
it's a different energy to be able to like see you guys and feel the room.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's why we're able to access the emotions
a little bit. Maybe.
Thank you for that.
I think also that's whenever I go back to that story, that's hard.
Raw.
Yeah,
it's right there.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's a pretty good spot to close out.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
And
subscribe.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
We really are supposed to do that at the beginning of the video.
But if you've watched this far, you should definitely like and subscribe.
If you made it this far, why not?
And we'll see you guys in the next one.
See ya.
Bye.